jobs available. So if somebody wants to work, there are many, many jobs available, even right here in Richland County. So we're pretty happy about all that. But you know, it's not all roses, it's not all good, never is. We do have some problems in the state. One of them is the drug problem. You knew I was going to say that, right?
Yes.
So I want to give you a little perspective. You know, we're losing over 12 people per day. Think about that. So today, as we speak, on average, 12 people will lose their lives to an overdose. A lot of people. When I started 5.5 years ago, it was about 5. 5 people lose their lives every day in this state. And we're not talking about the United States, we're just talking about the state of Ohio. So we haven't really made that much progress. We have passed about 40 pieces of legislation dealing with the epidemic. We have spent north of $1 billion, and that's a B, $1 billion. And the epidemic has gotten worse. I think the lesson here is that, first, as government, we're not going to solve the problem. We're going to be hopefully part of the solution. We can play a role. But in the end, it really takes all of us. It takes our communities and neighborhoods and our faith-based community to help lead us out of this problem. Government's not going to fix it. So I would ask all of you to, whatever you can do, get involved. You know, get involved through your church, or maybe through a neighborhood group, whatever it might be. Try and get involved, because we're losing an awful lot of people. And just so you know, this epidemic is different than any epidemic we've ever had. One of the reasons it's different is because it started in our medical community, believe it or not. People were prescribed painkillers. And as a result of that, many people got addicted through no fault of their own. So maybe they had a surgery, maybe it was a sports injury, a car accident. People were prescribed a painkiller, and they got hooked. So we think we fixed some of that. We think we put some constraints on our medical community so that can't happen in the future. But nonetheless, we have an awful lot of people that have become addicted. So about 80% or so of the heroin users started with legal painkillers. So it's a very, very different situation we have today than we've ever had, ever. So the epidemic is very serious. Another problem I'm working on is your energy bill. I'm really switching topics here. In a nutshell, you've been getting ripped off. We've all been getting ripped off from our utility company. I have to say it like it is. Yeah. So, in 1999, the state deregulated. So we went from a monopoly system to a competition system, an open market system. That's why you can choose your electric supplier, right? Everybody can choose now. And when that happened in 1999, there was some thoughts that the electric bill should go down. Yeah, they should go down, right? Well, they haven't. They haven't went down. What's interesting about it is part of the bill has went down, that generation part. So when you choose your supplier, that part of your bills went down. But other parts have went up, almost by the same amount. So in the state of Ohio, all of the bills went down on the generation side, roughly $15 billion with a B at the end. So at the state level, we deal with billions. At the federal level, they deal with trillions. So we're at the billion level. So as the generation piece of your bill went down $15 billion all together, the distribution went up $15 billion. It's yearly about the same number. It's not even, they didn't even, literally the same number. So as a result, those benefits of competition that were put in place in 1999, one of those benefits is lower cost. They have not resulted in lower bills. So I have some legislation that would eliminate these extra charges that are showing up on everybody's bill. So, are you AEP down here? First time. So your AEP, so on most AEP bills have somewhere around 20 riders or extra charges.
Oh,
Right?
yes.
Sometimes you can figure out what they are, sometimes you can't. I can't hardly see
Recovery charge.
all that stuff. So if you're in First Energy territory, Ohio Edison, I have Ohio Edison, there's upwards to 30 riders on the bill, or the bills in the northern part of the county. So my legislation would get rid of that. We're going to get rid of those riders. They have no value other than taking money out of your pockets and putting it into utilities' pockets. So that's one thing that the bill will do. Another part of the bill is, now this one's going to be a shock to you, because it's a shock to me. When it's later deemed that the utilities have overcharged you, and how that happens is once they've been given, once they start a new rate, the rate that they charge you for your electric, if it's deemed later at this Ohio Supreme Court that that was illegal, they don't have to give the money back. It is the darndest thing I have ever seen. So in the last 5 or 6 dozen years or so, we have paid, all of us, $799 million that was later deemed to be unlawful. They do not have to give that money back. My bill would require them to give the money back. I can tell you in business, when there's a mistake made and maybe a customer overpaid you, maybe they paid an invoice twice by mistake, it happens.
Darn it.
When you immediately find that out, though, you correct it right off. You don't argue over that. It's a mistake, right? Somebody's overpaid you. You get back the money. Well, not in the electric generation field, oddly enough. So my bill would get that money back to the people who paid it when it was paid unlawfully. So that's a couple things that are issues. There are many others. But let me open it up to questions so I get a chance to answer any that you might have.
Well, I do have a comment.
Yep.
We got an electric bill several months ago for $2.40, and they said they were giving us a refund because there was an error made somewhere. But we could not understand exactly what it was all about.
I'm glad to hear that, but it's unusual.
Well, I know, but it blew my mind but it said it in little letters, in little small. It was explaining why. Well, it didn't make a lot of sense, but I just paid that $2.40 and didn't complain. I want to know what the state is doing about the algae on Lake Erie.
Yeah.
Or is that federal?
No, that's state.
That's
It's actually several states have to be in Canada, has to be involved.
Right.
Michigan, we all have to. We have a compact or an agreement among the states here that where the water flows into Lake Erie.
We need Pennsylvania, Michigan.
I don't know. I don't think so. It's mostly that western side.
Yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah. So we have passed 3 or 4 pieces of legislation to deal with that. And there was just a report out, funny you should ask that, like this week, or maybe it was last week, I think maybe it was last week, from the Ohio EPA that said that the nutrient loading, that's what they call that. So what that is the nutrients that are in the water streams that are ending up in the lake that cause the algae blooms have not went down at 1 iota. So we have still a lot of work to do.
How do you clean that? I mean, how do you fix it?
There's a couple problems. One is some of it's agriculture, the manure, the fertilizer, the phosphorus that runs off. The phosphorus is adding to this problem, but also the wastewater treatment plants are a big problem. So the city of Detroit dumps all of their stuff into the lake.
Oh, great.
And some others do as well, but what they're dumping in is not treated properly.
Yeah, but that's
And-
good stuff.
Yeah.
We treated it right.
Well,
So-
we're on the west side of Lake Erie,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
when we're out there, we can see Michigan and all, and there's all that algae, and that really is tough to fish in, do any boating in it. So I was curious.
It's still a work in progress. There's
Okay.
going to have to be more changes made. The other problem was the Corps of Engineers was dredging the Maumee River, and they were taking that and dumping it right in the middle of the lake. Well, we have finally got them to stop doing that. That was also added to the problem as well. So it's a multifaceted problem that is going to require a lot of changes. Some changes have been put in place, but apparently they haven't been enough because the data suggests that it's still a problem.
Okay, well, thank
So
you.
we're working on it.
Well, at least I know you're working on it.
Oh yeah, it's actually a big topic. In fact, there's another piece of legislation that's going to be introduced to continue the work and continue the changes. So it's a touchy situation because it affects farmers, it affects the wastewater treatment plants. I'm not concerned about touching them, but there's a cost to getting them up to specs. So there's a lot to be done.
Well, I know that Toledo had a real problem a couple years ago
Yep.
with the water
Yeah.
because of the algae.
Turns out, though, their problem was internal. They had a breakdown in the treatment plant because there was another Oregon, the city of Oregon
Right.
had their intake right next to Toledo's. They had no problem.
Okay.
So there was a problem with their treatment plant. I think there was
Okay.
people lost their jobs over that.
Oh.
That was a big deal. Because
Well,
they
it was
had
because
no
nobody had
water.
water.
And we had the National Guard up there.
Yep.
It was a big issue. The governor went up there.
Yep, we were there.
So, yeah, I know you guys were, I know. Yeah.
What's to do with this, the farms that are about to be restored in Shelby, and I guess if this actually works up there, then they're wanting to do it here too, with these dams? Why would they do that and not just clean out the rivers instead?
Yeah. So that, believe it or not, will never come across my desk. That, I don't have any say in those projects. Back in the 30s, the state, after some major flooding, we were talking about flooding earlier, where was it, down in the Dayton area? That all flooded so bad. In the 30s, they developed these districts, these watershed districts. And we're in the Muskingum watershed district, and they're the ones doing it. It's not the state doing it. They have authorization, ability, and jurisdiction to do that. So all I can tell you is, if you all would agree that there's flooding going on, and if there's a willingness to fix it, I think it's multifaceted. My understanding is, hearing it from the Muskingum people, that cleaning out the river will help, but it won't prevent flooding in the big flood events, the ones that we were talking about. Not to mention, if you send that water down a little bit faster, you may flood somebody down at the other end. So all these things, that's the thing about water. Water doesn't respect political jurisdictions. They don't care about city lines or county lines. It's going to go where it's going to go. So whatever gets done, if anything gets done, it should be done as a group, as a county-wide, and not as sections, in my opinion.
I was just trying to figure it out, because from what my understanding, it's $70 million for this thing in Shelby.
I think there's several proposals at different levels of money.
Nothing's been approved yet.
It would be
It's a long way from me.
to save like $10 million worth of property, and these farmers won't be able to get flood insurance. The farms that would actually get flooded, they can't, because a friend of mine is one of the farms that land that get flooded, and he's already checked into it, they won't be able to get flood insurance.
So he ought to probably get hold of the farmers up in the Chippewa, where they've built, I think, 8 dry dams up there, and all that's farmed. And he should probably drive up there and talk to some of those farmers and see how it works for them. So, but I don't have any say in that project. I don't have any say in any of it. That's not a state issue, so that's a local issue. That's a Muskingum watershed.
Which we're in. Anyone else have any questions for our state representative?
Any more information on the non-emergency medical transportation?
Yeah, we were just talking about that today. We had a hearing. Not much. It's slow. It's been slowed down. The reason is because just heard this morning. The Medicaid director said that they slowed it down because by the time they would like to get it ready to go live, the new administration will be coming in. So they're going to slow it down so the new administration can figure out how they should proceed. So what I'm talking about, we're all voting for a new governor this year. I don't mean to be political, but that's why we're getting a new governor. I don't know who that person will be yet, but it's going to be left for that new governor to decide how they proceed. So that came up in the budget, and I propose to make it voluntary. I'm not sold yet that it's going to be the best thing to do is to have a statewide broker for all this transportation services. So I propose to make it voluntary for the county. So if you're a county and your transportation system is working very well, leave them alone. If you're a county like in the southeast part of the state where you're crossing county lines and there's all kinds of issues trying to get people to the providers for their medical appointments, then maybe a broker would make sense for that. But I wanted to make it voluntary. I lost that battle. I lost that one. It did not make the budget. That change did not happen. Either I didn't sell it very well or they didn't want to do that idea. I got most of my ideas in the budget. That was one of them I didn't make it. So you don't get them all. I wish you did, but.
Anybody else got questions?
Well, I know you travel a lot, and I'd like to give you a little gift.
Oh, thank you very much.
For coming,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
you're to think of us when you
Oh, I
use
will.
it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
very
much.
Okay, thank you.
We
Thanks for
appreciate
having me.
it.
Thank you.
Yes.
You're on that wrong. Okay.
He's going to leave. He's been on the road all day. He's been
All weekend.
All
All
weekend. He's
week,
been
yeah.
home all
Yeah,
week.
I've been home, so.
So,
That's part of the job. I'm not complaining. So
I know.
That's the way it goes.
I know.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing.
But we
That's
thank you
part
for
of it.
taking
Oh,
the
you're welcome.
time,
Thank you for
and
having me.
we really do appreciate this.
Congratulations.
And I'll pass that around so everybody can see it.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Keep up the good work. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.